Hello everybody, welcome to Psychology of Adolescence. Today is the second session. Just a review of last week, we talked about there are three very important developmental processes, including biological processes and cognitive and emotional processes. And today it's the beginning of Psychology of Adolescence starts with the biological foundation. So among the three major theoretical processes, the biological stage is the first one because other cognitive and emotional changes in adolescence actually followed by the biological foundation, biological changes. So today, as a part of biological foundation, we are going to think about what kind of biological changes adolescents have gone through, including sexual hormones and growth spurt and body image, and what's the influences of early or late maturation. And then start with thinking about the puberty, because usually the puberty is the onset of adolescence, and the puberty is determined usually by the biological influences. And then we'll talk about the health issues of adolescence, because that's a kind of a very critical period of the time. Adolescents need to think about our health by themselves. So that's our major topics for today. Okay, start with the puberty. This is the concept. And in Asian concept of a puberty, translated of the puberty is that the meaning is of a puberty is thinking of spring. So when we say that the spring is a blossom of the flowers and lots of changes and fantasy and that kind of things, and it's kind of the similarities of the adolescence of whole human life. So when we say the puberty, that is the very rapid physical changes involving hormonal and bodily changes take places of this stage of life. So puberty, that there is the individual differences when the puberty starts, but usually the people start about 9 years old and then finish about 16 years old. And this is the beginning of the adolescence. So as I emphasized before, puberty has more emphasis on biological beginning of adolescence. So when we say that adolescence, even though there is other part of the change and characteristics, biological foundation, that is the first stage and first the influences we can think of. Then what's determinants of the puberty? And I told you that the puberty starts years of 9 and finish about the age 16. And about those ages, what kind of physical changes start? And there is a certain kind of several factors we can think of the causes or consequences of the puberty. First of all, it's hormonal changes. And usually we call that's an endocrine system. And secondly, it's our weight, also determinants of the puberty. And also the body fat. So if somebody has more fat than at the other adolescents, probably their puberty starts earlier. And then Latin. So several, these four major determinants of the puberty people usually think of. And this particular puberty, what's the characteristics of this period of the time is that some kind of biological changes, but also we needed to think of that social cultural factors also have an influence on the onset of the puberty. First, in terms of the hormonal change, what's hormones? Because we sometimes attribute our mistake or certain behavior to the hormone, because hormone, I did something very terrible things. So that is a kind of excuses of our mistake or certain things, unreasonable behavior certain time. But hormones, by definition, it's a powerful chemicals secreted by the endocrine gland and carried through the body by the bloodstream. So meaning that because bloodstream carries the hormone, the influence of the hormone is very directive and very fast. So this is the typical and major group of the sexual hormone. It's androgen, this is a main classes of male sex hormones. And estrogen, that is a main class of female sex hormones. So this measure the hormones has a big changes during adolescence, and as a result of those hormonal change, some of the physical changes we can observe during the puberty. And as you see that this is the very dramatic change during adolescence depending on the male and female. As you see that this graph for boys, so this is a group of estrogen for the female sex hormone, and then upper part shows that that is androgen for the boys' hormonal changes. So for boys, this particular group of sexual hormones for male has dramatically increased this time. And on the contrary, for girls, this particular group of the hormones showing the female characteristics increased during the adolescence. And the govern the path and the flow of hormones, there's some systems, and there's a principle and the rules to govern the speed and the amount of hormones governed by these particular systems. And there's a certain area of our body had to play a role to decide or make a decision of how much of hormones has to be released, and or in what point has to be decreased the amount of the hormones. And this major part of our body have those roles. Hypothalamus and pituitary, the gland located in our brain, and they are related to the functions of hormones, but particularly they have an influence on sexual behavior and our sexuality. And third part of the thyroid, the gland is another part of endocrine system, and gonad and the sex gland is the actually physical location of our sexual organs. All right. So how this system work, and this picture shows that actually hypothalamus, it's kind of our brain. That's a base of our the command of the hormonal release or decrease. So start with the hypothalamus, go to the pituitary gland and gonad, and then release the actual hormone. And the hypothalamus monitor this amount of the hormone is enough or need more or need to be decreased the amount of hormone. So make a decision and then release the decision of the amount of the hormones, and then so goes to hypothalamus again. So we call particular this feedback system as a negative feedback system, meaning that it's not actively hypothalamus make a decision. This the hypothalamus decision based on the amount of the hormones, particular endocrine, estrogen, and androgen. So we call those a feedback system as a negative feedback system. And this is what kind of hormones, in particular name of it, released and in which area. So this shows that this is our body for men and women, and it's particular those major part of our the body shows that where they are located. So hypothalamus and pituitary and thyroid gland, and then the sexual organs, you can see it. And since this is a very small letter, but the picture you can find in textbooks, so just see that and closely look at the location and then what's the functions they carry. So you can find that just to make sure that the information in your textbook. There are two major phases of sexual hormone changes. Actually, the second phase of hormone changes is related to the adolescence or puberty changes. But first, the period of the time, we call that andrenarche. That occurs all the ages, is our childhood ages. But gonarche, That's the time the boys' first ejaculation of semen, and then menarche for the girls' first menstruation starts. So this is a particular time. It's very much determined our onset of the puberty. It's a very important phase of our development. So as I emphasized before, factors influencing onset of the puberty, actually the onset, it's a biological factors is a major one, including body fat and the fat and leptin. And also we needed to pay attention to other social cultural factors. Because certain ethnic groups, girls start menstruation later time than the Western, the culture, and also the level of socioeconomic status. So the people grown up in a very healthy and very rich family, they start earlier time because of the good nutrition. So other social cultural factors also have an influence on the onset of the puberty. So puberty, that is kind of the nickname of the onset of the adolescence, and pretty much governed by biological change, even though there is a social cultural factors. So that is a very important, the change and very unique change of adolescence throughout our life. And another thing in terms of our physical change through the adolescence is a growth spurt, meaning that you grown up very quickly and rapidly, and also you gain lots of weight during the early adolescence. Probably you remember the time. So adolescence, that's the time we observe the most rapid increases in growth since infancy. So in the very first age of our life, the infancy, that's the most rapid increase of our weight and height. And other than that, adolescence, that's the time second rapid increases we can observe. So that is the physical changes. And growth spurt, probably you know that the females, girls, a little bit earlier starts those growth spurts, about 2 years earlier than the boys starts the onset of growth spurt. So this graph shows the female starts a little bit 2 years earlier, like starts between 10 or 12 years old. But for boys, they start between 12 to the 14 years old. So even though males start to getting taller than girls and also more weights than females, but females starts earlier. And another part of the physical changes is a sexual maturation. And we already learned that there is a sexual hormones like androgen and estrogen for males and for females. And those hormonal changes brings the changes of the sexual activities and sexual behaviors and also sexual interest among the adolescents. That is based on our sexual maturation. So that's a physical and biological changes. And this graph shows that what particular sexual maturation starts and appear during adolescence for boys and for the girls. And as you see that actually the growth spurt coming first, and then sexual maturation later for both for boys and girls. And after menstruation, the females start to have a breast change and also the pubic hair. And for boys, after the height spurt, and then shows that the particular sexual maturation we can observe. So that's the time and how long it shows that. So that is just purely the physical and biological changes. Since this is a psychology class, even though the physical change itself is very important, but also we needed to understand that what kind of psychological impact of those the physical changes. I think it's a very important thing. So we're going to think of the psychological dimension of the puberty. First of all, I want to emphasize that this is the time the adolescents start to think of their body. And they have their own body image. It can be a negative and also positive. So body image is important in a sense that that's a basis of self-concept. So probably you observe that yourself and also the cousins or your sister or brothers, it's from the adolescence they start to taking a shower longer than before because they look at the mirror on and very longer period of the time and realize that they are very interested in their particular part of body. Some adolescents are interested in their height and weight or the faces and the skins and depending on their interest in. So that is shows that they start to have their own body image. And body image, that is the basic understanding of who I am. So if the people have a positive body image, that is a good start of the self-concept. There is a gender differences. This is another very interesting and important change of gender across the culture. Usually females start to have a more negative body image compared to the male. And I want to just ask you the reason. Why do you think the female adolescents have a more negative body image compared to male? Because body image is not just based on our objective physical attraction, it's more kind of a subjective evaluation of who we are and how they like themselves, their body. And maybe the gender issues we are going to think of later in chapter 5, we'll talk about more in detail why the girls, female adolescents are more vulnerable with the body image of and start particular adolescents. And since they are interested in body image, there are shows that the physical appearance getting more important to the adolescents. So we call that's a perceived importance of physical appearance shows that very vividly during adolescence. And also body image have an influence on health. So some adolescents have put on a diet very heavily and had the eating disorder problems and started at the adolescence. So that is relations of body image with the health issues also. So another psychological dimensions of the puberty, we have to think of that what kind of hormones what kind of influence of hormones have on our behavior. So sometimes we see that the increase of negative and variable emotions can be explained by the hormones. Sometimes people exaggerate all kind of emotional changes, all kind of negative behavior they attribute to the hormones, but that's not true. But we need to admit that there is a relationship between the hormonal change with a negative and variable the emotions. But hormonal activity is influenced by many factors, not just the biological factors, but also social, the cultural things. So when you think of your emotional changes and also negative behavior, like too much aggressive behaviors or too much depression during the adolescence, not just this happens because of hormones. Other influences also you need to think of that. Maybe early and late maturation, that is one part of the influences, one part of the factor have an influence on our behavior and also our emotional change. So what do you think? What's your experiences? Do you consider you as early mature or late mature? And have you thought about what's the influences of those early maturation and late maturation? Research shows that there is some benefit and also there is some problems with either early maturation and late maturation, and also those benefit and problems are different depending on the gender. So for example, early matures of female adolescents, they sexually grown up first earlier than other friends. And then they are picked up by the old male adolescents easily, and they start to dating earlier ages. And they are exposed to the danger more than other girls. So we can say that early maturation for girls can have problems. And for boys, early maturation can be a big influence on the solid of the self-esteem and high self-esteem, but also the late maturation can be a solid basis of the self-concept. So it's hard to tell whether it's good or bad for everybody or for all gender, but there's influences of early and late maturation. So in conclusion of the puberty, do you think that the puberty effects exaggerated or should be more exaggerated? There is individual differences, and usually people exaggerate the puberty effects, but actually the puberty the effects can be explained by other factors, also personality and socio-cultural factors, so it should not be exaggerated. That's my conclusion. And but also we needed to know that the puberty, the effects on body image, and also adolescents interested in date and sexual behavior, that is affected by puberty change, and these kind of consequences of the puberty effect is very important for the later our life and our the self-concept and also our relationship later on. Change the topics of physical changes is the health. Why we're talking about the health related to adolescence? Because this is the time, very critical juncture in health, time to learn how to take care of yourself. In adolescence, I keep emphasizing that this is a period of the time we develop our own identity. So we declare we are independent person, even though we have a good support from friends and family. But this is the time you need to be more responsible for yourself. And health, that is a very symbolic kind of the area of our life needed to be cared by yourself. But usually the adolescence shows that more health destructive behavior, but this is the time you needed to reduce health compromising behavior such as drug abuse and violence and unprotected sexual intercourse and dangerous driving. At the same time, you needed to increase health-enhancing behavior such as exercising, eating nutritiously, and wearing seatbelts and getting adequate sleep. And probably when you heard that, oh, that's the things we don't have to intentionally make efforts, and that's not that important things in my life, but that's not true. If you don't pay attention and taking care of your behavior, taking this very particular health-enhancing behavior, probably you have a really hard time later on in your life. And remember that adolescence, that's a peak period of the time you have a good health. Afterwards, your health decrease gradually. So if you don't take care of your health during the adolescence, later life, you have such a hard time. Do you know that what's the leading 3 causes of death in adolescence? The first is unintentional injuries and homicide and suicide. Even though that's the statistics of the American statistics, but it can be some common sense of the leading causes of the deaths across the culture. So when I say that here, unintentional injuries because your lack of care of your health, for example, driving dangerously, you didn't take taking seatbelts, that kind of mistake can cause unintentional injuries and result in death finally. So very have to be careful. So the adolescents needed to learn that what's health-enhancing behavior, and have to learn to adopt those health-enhancing behaviors, taking care of your nutrition and sleeps and exercise and sports. And nutrition means that don't eat the junk food, but just thinking of that very balanced your dishes, and also sleep pattern is another thing. The adolescents sleep very late and wake up very late, and that have an influence on whole your life and the daily patterns of your life living. So have to pay attention, and also make intentional efforts to do the regular basis, take an exercise and participating in some kind of the sports. In conclusion, For the biological foundation of adolescence, I empathize that biological foundation of adolescence is important because that determines the onset of adolescence. And we call particular puberty, that's the nickname, kind of the nickname of adolescence. And even though there is some individual differences, biological determinants of adolescence can be explained by the phenomenon of the puberty. So related to the puberty, we need to also think of that there's some psychological dimension. Those physical, biological changes brings to our emotions and relationship and so forth. And also the health issues is another issues for the adolescents. So because that's the time you needed to learn how to take care of yourself and you needed to be responsible of your life, that your body, that is the starting point of your life. So thank you very much for this week, the lecture. And next week, we are going to think of that cognitive changes of adolescence. See you later.